How is anyone in the year 2020 shocked by any news reports about Donald Trump? Especially reports which fit a pattern, like this recent "Trump thinks soldiers are suckers and hated John McCain" piece. This fits perfectly into the cultural perception of Trump. Honestly, at this point, I just assume people who react like this are just reacting how they think they're supposed to, trying to project some sort of image of normality onto the world. You know, the whole "this is not who we are as a country" crowd. This article by Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief at The Atlantic, is like catnip to these people. The incredible thing about this piece is that, if the reports are true, Trump isn't even wrong here. Now, they're not for the reasons he thinks, but he's still not wrong. Let's get into it. First things first, this is the funniest headline I've seen in so long. What a great use of quotation marks. The piece quotes Trump as referring to a cemetery full of Marines who died in World War I as being filled with losers. The piece goes on to say, in a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Belleau Wood as suckers for getting killed. This is the one line an American is never supposed to cross. Of course.
You gotta support the troops, right?
You have to.
And it's just so incredibly funny to me that this sacred cow has been slaughtered so ruthlessly. Right after this comes a great bit where Trump supposedly asked his aides, who were the good guys in this war? And doesn't understand why the United States would intervene on the side of the Allies. Note here that the article does not explain why the United States did so, or make a value judgment on who the good guys were. It's left up to the mind of the reader, something so obvious that's not even worth our time going into. Let's just talk about the Cheeto in the White House, and not even think about the fact that World War I was started by a series of tripped up treaties and, well, dick measuring by European powers. It was a thoroughly needless war. A needless war that, might I add, the United States profited massively from. As the great powers of Europe were fighting each other for dominance of the continent, American industrial production increased 32%, and gross national product increased by almost 20% between 1914 and 1917. US exports were then 2.5 times greater than the highest pre-war level. To paraphrase British Marxist Alan Woods, America entered the war to protect its own imperial interests, which would be challenged by German dominance of the continent. Now, I'm not saying that it would have been good or bad if Germany had won the war. I'm saying that America's interests in intervening were not altruistic or heroic. The American Marines who died in France were, as Trump crudely put it, suckers. Genuinely though, I feel for the poor bastards. The conditions of World War I are famously horrendous, and to go across to the other side of the world to die in service for the American Empire is about as futile as it gets. I've driven through lots of old, nearly abandoned country towns here in Australia, where there are no jobs but a lot of meth. What most of these towns have in common is an old RSL building, the Returned Services League of Australia. The RSL is an organisation that attempts to look after returned soldiers, and it became huge after World War I. These old haunts are littered across the outback. Whenever I drive past an RSL location, I always think to myself, what did an 18-year-old kid born in Warrnambool have to do with a series of disagreements between European superpowers? They never should have been there. The war never should have happened. There were no heroes, only victims. As socialist pamphlets from the time argued, a bayonet was a weapon with a worker at each end. But no, to Jeffrey Goldberg and The Atlantic, this is all about Trump not understanding patriotism, service, and sacrifice. 3 things that are all bad under the American Empire. People living in America should not be patriotic, should not serve its interest, and certainly should not sacrifice for it. The government of the United States and its representatives don't care if its citizens live or die, let alone if they have a house or adequate medical care in the meantime. Who cares what one wannabe fascist said about another one's military service? Personally, I like people who didn't bomb Vietnam. Goldberg even reflects on the fact that Trump didn't do any damage to himself while attacking military-adjacent people, because politically, it doesn't matter. So why do people care about this stupid article? Who is surprised by this? What is the point? In another anecdote, the president and his then chief of staff, John Kelly, went to visit the grave of Kelly's son, Robert, who was killed in Afghanistan after stepping on a landmine. Again, the article criticizes Trump for not understanding Robert Kelly's sacrifice for the United States. What was in it for them, Trump wondered. Well, what was in it for Robert Kelly was continuing his family's military dynasty, for the political and financial power that it brought, at the expense of people from smaller nations all around the world, like Afghanistan. Goldberg chooses not to criticize George W. Bush for wrongly invading Afghanistan in the first place, nor Obama for keeping the military there at the time of Robert Kelly's death. John and Robert Kelly were not suckers. They're some of the people who are upholding this abhorrent system. The suckers are the kids in high schools in rural America who join the military as a way of getting an education or as a way out. Let's not pretend it's about sacrifice or heroism. Listen to what former troops say about their experiences. They often see their past selves as suckers, duped by a false sense of instilled patriotism or a lying army recruiter. But liberals in the American media do not care. This isn't just about attacking Trump. This is what they truly believe. Democrats are served by the military-industrial complex just as well as Republicans. Their power comes from American military might as well. Just because they don't fetishize the troops as openly and constantly as the Republicans doesn't mean it's something we can ignore. To wrap up, service to the United States is an inherently bad thing, and it's certainly not wrong to interrogate that service. Even if it's done in, frankly, such an arse-backwards way as Trump does here, at least it's getting to a larger truth. Liberals who pretend it's not are merely helping America's imperial designs on the world and empowering fascism. Like I said at the start, this is all about projecting a sense of normalcy back onto the world. The problem is, the supposedly normal world before Trump was terrible, and this is the world the Atlantic wants to go back to. And it's the people they trick who are the real suckers. Thanks for watching. As always, if you want to harass me on Twitter, I'm at HardcoreLime, and if you want to help the channel, there are links below.